Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show planned out here for you today. It's going to be outstanding, at least in the way I view it. We have a number of things that I want to get across ahead of time. We're going to be talking about OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. So I'm just going to tighten this 3 times. And then I'm just kidding. A couple things right off the bat. First off, none of us are doctors. We have not been to school long enough. We have not got the title. Anything we do talk about today is going to be from our own experience and from our own. Uh, if you do have an issue, if there's something that is bothering you or something that is really striking a chord that is agitating or elevating your parasympathetic nervous system, bounce. By all means, talk to a doc, talk to a friend, talk to somebody else, regulate, and then re-engage us at another time. It'll be good to go. If you have any comments or questions, do put them in the comment box. We read them, we put them up, we discuss them, we do all that good stuff. And while I am going through my rote of information, what y'all should be doing is liking the channel or liking the show, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell. That way we can have more subscribers and you guys get an email every time we go live, which is every day. So, and I think that's all the preamble. I'll hit the checklist.
I think if you can put that in a bottle and just pop the lid off every morning and just pour that straight out, and that's what we need at the start of every show. However, you know what I'm like? There's always a better way to do it. And so that took you about 99 seconds, which is kind of interesting because we've got 99 Glen Kirkland on with us right now. And so I think it needs to be under 90 seconds.
Raj, I'll tighten it up.
Yeah, just tighten it up. Pick up the pace.
I like it. I can definitely do that. Glen, good to see you again, man. Nice to have you back on here. Yeah, man. That's awesome. So when you and I were talking about dates to come on and topics and stuff like that, one of the things that struck a chord with you was obsessive compulsive disorder. And we're going to get into that in 2 seconds. I just have one little comment here. Chris says, good morning, everyone. Many new subscribers, so please say hello. Even better, leave a comment on your favorite The Collective video. It helps new viewers decide on which videos to watch. That's a great point, Chris. Thank you very much.
I'll
there
dig,
you go. By all means. And yeah, and actually at the end of every show too, there is a little comment. If you listen to the audio version of this, there's a little thing saying how can we do this better. By all means, leave us little notes. I read them all, and then we can make adjustments on the fly. So let's do this. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Glen, you want to give us a little rundown how you feel about it? Why was this one clicked in your head that you want to talk about?
So obsessive compulsive disorder is something that a lot of people suffer with. And it's not just like you hear people joke around about, oh, I have OCD because I like my fridge organized a certain way, or I want my house has to be nice and tidy. It's like a debilitating disorder for a lot of people. And it's on a spectrum, right? So some people, it can be, they want things lined up in a certain order. Some people want, need to flick on the light switch 35 times before they enter a room. Like, it's a huge spectrum. For me, it's more of, and I think this is pretty general for a lot of guys or a lot of people that have gone through anything traumatic. It's more of like fixating, and they obsess about one certain thing. So for me, it's almost like one certain thing at a time. So I have like some moments I'm obsessed with my golf swing. I love golf. So I will watch videos and practice my swing and go practice and practice and practice and practice. And that's almost like a healthier obsession. Where other times I'll think like, oh, I'm planning a trip. Well, I can't book that trip until I've done all this research and looked at every single scenario, every situation, and plan it out. So again, it's like, and a lot of guys that have came and talked to me about their issues, it's more of a fixation and of like an almost borderline obsession. than it is of obsessive compulsive. So it's, for me in particular, like it's some things like buying a car. I'll research every car on the market and then find out from there what I'll do. But it could take me months or a year. And then it's almost the biggest battle with fixating for me is like when you start spinning out, and then you got to kind of break that cycle.
Yes, I know that feeling quite well. Shaun, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to get to Glen's comments here in a sec, but I just want to establish really quick OCD, just for anyone out there who needs a more broader definition of it, if you will. So again, I just threw up OCD with ChatGPT 4.0 about 12 seconds before Glenn started talking, because I wanted to understand it a little bit better myself. So here we go. OCD, or Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, is a mental health condition characterized by recurring unwanted thoughts, ideas, or sensations, in brackets obsessions, that lead to repetitive behaviors or mental acts, compulsions. People with OCD often feel driven to perform these rituals or behaviors in order to alleviate anxiety or prevent a feared event from occurring. There's some common examples: excessive hand washing, checking, rechecking locks or appliances, counting, arranging objects in specific orders, etc. The exact cause of OCD is unknown, but it is believed to involve a combination of genetic, neurological, and environmental factors. Imbalances in certain chemicals in the brain, such as serotonin, may also play a role in the development of OCD, etc., etc. There's ways to deal with it, etc. And so, for myself, I don't know if I have OCD or not. I don't know, but I don't care. If someone walked through my front door and told me that I've got OCD, I'd say, okay, cool, thanks. Anything else? Have a good day. Because it's a non-factor to me. Because as Glen just described, planning a trip, taking weeks or months or years to plan a trip and know all of the options and plan for all of the eventualities and et cetera, or a car, shopping for a car. Dude, that's my life. That's what I do. That's exactly what I do as well. That's how I plan. That's how I look. That's how I learn. But for myself, I don't consider it as fixating on trying to find the perfect flight to wherever, or the perfect tires for the perfect truck that I don't even know yet. I don't consider that as fixation. What I do consider it is focalized attention on the thing in front of me that fascinates me. It's the puzzle that I reterm it. I love solving a good puzzle. And if the puzzle is, what car do I want this year? I might take the whole year to figure that out, and maybe next year as well. And unless there are timelines to deliver against, unless there are milestones that are non-negotiable, if there's hard timings that I've got to meet, then okay, I'll reverse engineer it and work backwards and figure out how much time I've got to figure out what I got to do. But if I've got a blank slate in front of me called figure out which truck you want, Shaun, I'll take as long as I want to take, and I'll learn as much as I want to learn, and I'll be as fascinated as I want to be fascinated. And to me, I spin it into a freaking gamify this thing. Oh, I'm going to buy a truck. Cool. I'm going to buy the best truck ever for me based on the mega research that I do that intrigues me. And as I rumble down the rabbit hole of fascination or focalized attention, I learn a whole pile of peripheral things along the way, rather than focusing on, man, I've looked at these tires 100 times tonight. I can think about, I've looked at tires a lot tonight, and how's that adding to my further trajectory on my fascination with all things trucks? So I just keep pursuing and growing in the moment of the research, rather than staying in an iterative loop and never breaking out of it, because I can't think, I want to learn deeper, or I want to get further down this trajectory of learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Glen, you got any thoughts?
I think that differentiates obsessive compulsive disorder, which is like a negative, from
Right.
a like almost like kind of like what I have, like whenever I like hyper focus, or a fixation, where it can be turned into a real positive. Like
Right.
I was in after my military career, I was in real estate, and it was a borderline obsession with houses and with finding my clients the right property and the right home. And that wasn't a negative.
Yeah,
But
I just hear that as driven.
Yeah.
for sure. And
Right.
I think that's what differentiates obsessive compulsive disorder, which will consume someone's whole life, which is something someone doesn't want. You know, I've never met anyone that says, "Oh, I wish that I would, you know, check the locks 45 times." You know, that's it, you know, or just do it once and then, you know, be self-aware and know that you've done it correctly. Like, so the focus, the hyper focus that I think that Shaun you're talking about, and I know that I've dealt with, that you can really turn into a positive. Like after 10 years in real estate, I was able to retire because I was so focused and so determined to find the right properties for people. And I put my whole life on hold so I could do that one job, which is like, is it obsessive? Borderline, but it's definitely focused.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shaun.
Okay, just one other things that I'd like to say in respect to OCD, which again I may have. I don't know. No one's ever walked through my front door and told me, but I do know this: that when I decide to do something, I get it done, and in order to get it done, I've really got to focal on it. I've got to really target lock on what it is that I want to accomplish, and then I just start driving towards it. In order to drive towards it the way that it pleases me, it means I have to stay on task with a certain amount of ferocity or velocity that makes me feel like I'm actually in that game. And so for me, that requires sometimes a really, really intense focus on the trajectory ahead. Whereas when I was 20 years old and I didn't have all of the life experiences that I've got, my forward trajectory, my focus could be really wide because I didn't understand how to weaponize my whatever OCD is if I've got it. I didn't know how to weaponize my focalizing abilities. And so as I got older and older, and as I learned how to more tightly control my focus so that it was a positive rather than a negative, or so that it was a positive nearly every time rather than a happy balance 50-50 of positive and negative. Over the years, I've refined it to my intense focus, we'll call it, is showing successful outcomes rather than making me feel like I'm doing something wrong, or rather than making me feel like I've got a mental health struggle, or making me feel like I need to go check my locks 45 times. I've managed to patternize my life, which I think is really important for someone who may struggle with OCD. For me, for as long as I can remember, I look at the world in front of me, I timeline trend it, I patternize it, and then I subroutine it. So the moment that I start patternizing things, if I recognize that when I'm about to leave my house, I've got to go get my keys to the vehicle, I know exactly where my keys are. I don't have to look over there right now. I know they're there. They always hang there. That's my pattern. And by patternizing, we'll call it intense focus or OCD, perhaps. By knowing where everything is, I don't have to worry where everything is because it's always in its place. And I know that it seems for some people that it might be obsessive that I want my keys to always be where they're always supposed to be. But that alleviates another subroutine out of my life. It's done for the rest of my life. And now I can take the energy of dwelling on where's my keys? I hope my keys are hanging where they're supposed to be. Of course they're there because that's where I always put them. So now I can take that energy of, we'll call it worrying or considering where my keys are, and I just get to pour it into the focus in front of me, which is what I'm going to go crack out of the park that day, whatever I'm leaving my house for. If I'm going to leave through my front door and on the way I'm going to grab my keys that are always there, that energy is getting poured into what's ever on the other side of that front door. And so if all your energy is being poured into repetitive subroutines that you know are consistent and will always be there, move your energy into something that is new rather than the sub patterns that are already existing for years.
That's a great point. Glenn, you got any thoughts on that? Before I got a couple comments here, but
yeah, like as Shaun was saying that, I wrote down a few notes before we were meeting today, and that was one of the main things I wrote is routine. Like routine is such a it was one of the main reasons I was driven towards the military. Was I was like, as a teenager, like a lot of teenagers, I was a procrastinator. There's no room in that in the army. And I remember the first time someone, like, I got in trouble because my toothbrush holder was dirty. And then I realized, like, the reason why that you clean your toothbrush holder is because you never have to worry about it. If you just get into a routine of rinsing it out every time you use it. And my keys, the same as you, Shaun, they're in the same spot every day. So 100%. If I know if they're not there, it wasn't me, right? And if
that's right, me too.
Right, earlier today, I went and grabbed something from my car, and my keys are in my pocket. I know that's not where they're supposed to be. So when we hang up, I'm gonna go put them back down there because they're gonna end up in the washing machine or something. Who knows where they go?
Yeah, I mean, I have my keys on a little carabiner. And so when I'm walking, they're right over there hanging on a hook. I'll grab the beaner, click it to my belt loop, and I'm out the door. Mm-hmm. And when I come back in the house, they're still hanging off my belt loop. As I'm walking through the door, it's like drawing a pistol, except I draw my carabiner and then it goes straight back on the hook. I know it's weird, but that's what I do. And I do it without thought because I've subroutined it. And my energy is not like, oh, I've got to take the carabiner off. I've got to hang it on the hook. And then I get to think about what's next. It doesn't even happen, except it happens. So I can put my energy into who's in the house? How's everyone doing? How was school for you today, kid? As I'm non-focusing on hanging the key exactly where it belongs.
So there's a couple points here that I want to get across, but I have a couple comments as well. Funny enough, I always put my keys on a carabiner and I always put them on my belt loop. And the funny thing is that I had a number of keys and they would jingle when I walk, and I wear cowboy boots. So every time I step hard, they go ching, ching, ching. And my wife always says that I sound like I'm wearing spurs.
But you know the workaround for that? Just take the keys on the beaner and then just throw the key straight into the front pocket. Still on the beaner.
Still on the beaner, but in the pocket.
Your wife will thank me later.
Well, there's a whole other side to that, but I want to hit some of these points. So first off, Doc C, always good to see you on here. He says the most common comorbid disorder of OCD is depression, with others including ADHD, body dysmorphic disorder, panic disorder, autistic spectrum disorder, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's more complicated to be clinically diagnosed as it requires distress and impairment and duration. Glenn and Shaun are right. The clinical diagnosis is different from someone being driven or hyper-focused. And that's what I wanted to hit on was
nice.
OCD specifically is the disorder portion of it. So you can be obsessive. You can be compulsive. You can be obsessive and compulsive. But the disorder portion is when it actually starts to take over your life. 100%. So let's just say, you have your keys, you go to put them on the hook, and you put them on the hook and you walk off. But as soon as you do that, you're like, are they on the hook? And you have to double check. Okay, they're on the hook. But if they weren't on the hook, and you have this compulsion in your head to make sure like they have to be on the hook. So I have to like pull on them twice to make sure that they're on there so they don't just pop off like by accident. Or you have a carabiner that it needs to click in, so you have to like click it a couple times. How many people have stood in front of the barbecue and taken their tongs and gone click, click, click for no need, right? But that happens pretty regularly. That's a compulsive thing, but it's not a disorder because it doesn't affect or take over your life. It's just a compulsive thing that we're doing. And I think that's something to be brought up. I have a definition here as well. And it says right here, obsessions are unwanted intrusive thoughts, images, or urges that trigger intensely distressing feelings. So it's not just that the keys aren't there. It's the fact that now the world is ending because the keys aren't there, right? That's where the disorder portion comes into it, is that your obsession or your compulsion or your obsessive compulsion, if that doesn't happen, that will take over your brain. Similar to post-traumatic stress, where the disorder portion of it is when it takes over your day. So you get not just hypervigilant, but you get hypervigilant and aware and reactive to everything for a long period of time. Not so much outside of your control, but to a point that you are limited in your control, if that makes sense.
It's almost like when you say that and compare the PTSD, I heard a definition of PTSD, and it always stuck with me. It was a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, and it sounds like obsessive compulsive is almost an abnormal reaction to a normal situation. And I always thought, and I never thought about that until recently, until you brought that up. But it's kind of a unique situation where it's only a problem until it's a problem, right? Yeah. If Shaun puts those keys on that carabiner, on that hook, it's not a problem until he goes down and it affects his day-to-day life. I can see that.
Yeah, and that's where the disorder portion of it is, I think, something that needs to be brought up. And we talked about this when we were talking about body dysmorphia as well, is that you can have body dysmorphic tendencies, or you can feel body dysmorphic in a moment, but the moment it becomes a disorder is when it starts to take over your life. And Doxy's got a great comment on here. He said, I had a client whose home was robbed. After that, she would check locks on doors a dozen times, but it had to be a dozen times. And of course, OCD is on a continuum. So yeah, you can have, a minor OCD where you have to close your drawer 3 times. Cool. Or you have to walk around your house in a similar to when we were talking about fatherhood, Shaun, you got to walk in a clockwise direction. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel right. And your brain then starts to like get agitated just because it's not right, and you have to do it right. So I think that I just wanted to make sure that that's brought up, because as Doxy says, it is a continuum. And, you may have a tendency to do something. That's one thing. But when the disorder, when it starts to take over your life, when you are incapable of doing something else because you haven't done the obsession or the compulsion, that's the disorder portion of it. Question for you both, though. When you guys get fixated on something, what alleviates the feeling? When you are like, I have to figure out how to do this. What happened? How do you get through that portion?
How do you even learn that you have tendencies?
Awareness.
So by who?
Yourself.
Maybe.
Or others. Or others, I guess.
Yes, or others, most often than not. Because if you're what's a good word? Enlightened? No, that's a bit too weird. If you're aware enough of your tendencies, then you wouldn't be having this conversation. You wouldn't have to listen to this conversation. You'd be writing the book about OCD. So if you're so aware of yourself, you could write lots of books and you wouldn't have to be here for this moment to learn more about OCD. But that's not the case with pretty much anyone on the planet. And so a bunch of people are wondering maybe now, so am I compulsive? What even is compulsion? Where does compulsion come from? And so if you don't know that yourself, then that probably requires a cold eye review to determine if you've actually got any compulsion. So I see it all the time. I see it on start lines. I see it at the start of BJJ matches. I see it as when someone goes to grab the supermarket cart. I see compulsions all the time. And the compulsions that are corrosive, in my opinion, are the absolutely unnecessary actions in order to trigger the next action. And so by that, I mean, you see it all the time in baseball. The guy on the pitcher's mound has got to click his left heel 3 times. He's got to stub his right foot in the dirt 4 times. And then he's got to do a little bit of this. And then he's got to touch his hat. And then he's got to spit to the side. And then he's got to rub the ball a certain way. And then he's got to throw it up in the air 4 times. And then he can think about pitching. And so that didn't start on day 1. That kid, that 4-year-old or that 6-year-old or that 10-year-old that held a baseball in their hand for the first time, they were allowed to develop their compulsion pattern over a period of time. And no one ever stepped in and said, hey, kid, you know, when you're going to be 22 in the major leagues, do you want to be doing a hopscotch dance on the pitcher's mound for 5 minutes before you can throw a ball? So what if you don't have 5 minutes to throw a ball? What if you've only got 3 minutes? What happens to your routine? Now you can't even pitch. Let's say someone tells you you've got to pitch a ball in 12 seconds and you've still got 4.5 minutes of your compulsion to do. Now what? Not only are you suboptimal, but you're starting to question, like, I need to do that in order to be an effective baseball player. And that is so not true. The patterns that are created in life are allowed to happen. It's not an ambush. No one's born with a hopscotch dance in their head as a maybe pitcher 20 years from now. These are things that are developed. We allow ourselves to develop them if we're not paying attention, or they're allowed to be developed through people on the external viewing it and saying, I hope, good luck with that. I hope that kid breaks out of that pattern by the time he's 20. And so compulsions, we're not born with them. We either observe and ignore them until they become problematic, or other people observe them and don't do anything to stop them from becoming problematic.
That's a great point. Glenn, you got anything?
Yeah, like I know, just kind of to add on to what Shaun said, like it's not all it's only a problem until it's a problem, and I can't go to sleep unless I lay my clothes out for the next day. Is that a problem? No, not really, because I know the next morning I can sleep in a little bit longer and I can get things done, unless I really need to get to sleep and I don't have time to lay my clothes out. You know what I mean? So it's I like routine with a lot of my life, and I think a lot of that was instilled by the military, or my dad, who was military. So it's, you know, again, it's only a problem until it's a problem. That pitcher, if he's throwing a perfect game, you know, let him dance out there. You know, let him hop.
Unless it's 5 minutes long, you know?
That's right.
What do I have to do? Again, write it into your contract? You're only allowed 30 seconds on the pitcher mound before you throw it? You know, like what? Where does it end, right?
Well, they have a clock now. They have a clock.
Yeah, there's time.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So, but you're right. What if someone, you know, that hasn't been around forever? So what did they do when that time went in? I'm not sure. You know, for me, like, I'm a golfer. We're all about rituals and routine, right? Mm-hmm. So I have the same, every time I swing my driver, I go through the same list in my head. You know, my feet, my knees, my hips, my shoulders, my hands, my fingers. I hit the ball. I go through it in my head every time, but it takes me 7 seconds, right? So it's not like I'm taking a long time. Is that a problem? Never has been. But if it turned into take my glove off, take my pants off, throw them around my head a few times, then I'm probably going to be in jail for indecent exposure. And
still,
then
you would have had a good game.
It would have. I mean,
right?
Yeah. No one would be around to see it besides me. But yes, I
definitely wouldn't be allowed on that golf course again, for sure. You know, it's interesting too, because I was thinking that it really depends on what the compulsion is and where it sits. So if you were to think about, depending on the sport, like baseball, sure, there's lots of time. Time is taken all the time, right? There's getting up to the mound when you first are getting up to the plate. Sorry, when you first watch a batter step in, right? And he takes his foot and puts it in and squishes it and then grabs his bat and does a little thing and touches his hat and all those things. But you can't do that in basketball, right? If you got to take a shot, you got to take a shot. There's no ifs, ands about it, right?
Unless you're standing on the free throw line.
Exactly.
Now it's bounce it 3 times, spin it on your hand, bounce it twice, spin it on the, you know?
Yeah. And I was going to say that you touched on that with me when I was doing, I put up some dry fire drills that I was running on my pistol, and I was doing the jazz hand fingers, like, and you're like, why do you do that? I'm like, I don't know. And again, it's until it's a problem, it's not a problem, or until someone points it out to you and asks you specifically, why are you doing that?
Yeah, so what if Sean Taylor hadn't have said to Chance Burles, hey, drop the jazz hands, you foolio? What if someone hadn't have said that? You'd still be jazz handing, right?
I'd be jazz handing it up.
Your jazz hand dance would be even stronger than it was when you were jazz handing. So if there's no one to externally observe you and challenge your patternized compulsion, we'll call it, it's for you to do it. And so I noticed this at an early-ish age when I was starting into martial arts. And of course, I was fascinated with Bruce Lee. And one of the things that I really liked about Bruce Lee was his 2-inch punch, or his 1-inch punch, depending on who it was in front of him. And so the idea being that he could initiate a force vector without any motion or any disturbance in his own force. He was simply there, and then he was punching. And there was no other steps involved other than he existed as a human, and then a punch existed. And I could see that really clearly with my eye. I could see that really clearly with my mind, and that fascinated me. And so when I saw that, what I recognized within myself was, again, this is earlier into my martial arts career. In my stand-up game, I'd have to do like 3 bounces until I could throw a kick. Or I'd have to do 2 bounces until I did whatever. And all of that unnecessary motion was creating a pattern within me that I was starting to feel like, oh, a punch requires, a kick requires, an elbow requires, a knee requires. It didn't require anything other than the actual knee or the actual elbow. It didn't need an interpretive dance before I made my move. And so I recognized that my interpretive dance was not only wasteful, but it wasn't getting me to the purity of what I was trying to execute against, which was the punch. And so from that point forward, I then adopted you'll never be able to read what I'm going to do. I'm going to poker face this game all day long. So then I started analyzing sucker punches. So I spent a couple of years developing my sucker punch, from hands in pocket and a smile on my face to a split second later, smashing the bag. I've done thousands and thousands of those repetitions until I realized that from my inception of this is what I'm going to do as a thought to the action execution, there's nothing required in between those two things other than the nonsense that I build up in between those two moments. And by holding myself accountable in that, that's how I managed to sub-pattern or routine out all of the nonsense in my life that is just a simple execution and then dump off to the side so that I'm not getting lost in that gray zone of all the other stuff that I build into the simple subroutine that I can offload.
That's a great point. Glenn, you got anything?
No, I just love listening to Shaun sometimes. Like, yeah.
He's got some great lines.
But it's so true. Like that, all that white noise we have in our life, like limiting that and being able to focus is the key. Like that's just living simple, living clean, you know, like it's I just got married and
nice.
Yeah, got married and now we're having a baby and I just think like all the unnecessary stuff in people's lives that are like that I've eliminated to just hyper focus on, you know, being the best husband now and, you know, being a dad in a couple months. So it's a good trait to be able to eliminate the unnecessary and focus, just like you're talking about your sucker punch or Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. You know, it's just there's no unnecessary movements, unnecessary white noise, and so I'm able to focus.
Yeah. One of the things about baseball, and that's the reason that I brought it up, because I feel it's the most flary sport out there for the prima donna moment. You know, I get to do my interpretive dance before I actually do the thing that I'm here for. And so that's all fun, and it's all a visual distraction for the crowd, and it's really just a mental distraction for the individual who's only there for one reason, and that's to throw a freaking ball. And the rest of it is just a veneer of drama or operatic effort to uh, convince the individual that they're about to throw a ball. It's fascinating to me that as humans we have to build out a saga in order to scratch our butt. I mean, it's just a butt scratch, man. No need to do a dance, you know? And so the more butt scratching, the more dancing, the less balls that are being thrown. And then all of a sudden, people are showing up to a game where there's just a guy out there doing an interpretive dance and scratching his butt, and no balls are thrown. I mean, obviously, I'm building it out to the ridiculous to make the point that at what point does someone themselves say, what am I even doing? I'm supposed to throw a ball, not a dance. Or at what point does the crowd eating their popcorn think, I just wish you'd throw a ball. Maybe I should yell something like, throw a ball, dude. You know, either that guy's got to do it, or as the crowd, we have to do it. We have to interrupt the moment of the operatic affair and just say, throw a ball. And that's what I would challenge everyone out there to do. Bro, just grab your keys and walk out the door. No need to dance back and forth in your kitchen or check all the locks. You want to check all the locks? Good. Okay. Now that all of the locks have been checked, let's talk about how fewer locks you can check tomorrow, because I'm keeping my eye on you if you're not keeping your eye on yourself. So if we're not doing it, it's the crowd's job to do it, in my opinion.
You make a great point there in that there is an absolute allegory into life in this, in that, you know, a lot of the white noise that we see in our own lives, we don't see until it's pointed out, right? You can, it was just a little while ago, you told me, hey, you're not actually doing anything. Get to work. And I was like, in my head, I immediately, well, I got to go pick up my kids and I got to make sure this happens. And I started listing off all the things that need to be done before I would have free time in order to do something. But that's what those compulsions are. That's what those obsessions are, is that they are white noise when I could just pick up my ruck and start walking. It really is all it takes, is just picking it up and going. And whether that is for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 10 hours doesn't really matter. It's about the fact that it can be done right now.
Yeah, and didn't we like make some sort of at some point a reference to tinnitus, and how if you've got tinnitus, it's kind of like that, maybe not quiet all the time, but it's that background static. It's that white noise that you just get used to, and it's like it's a bit frustrating, it's a bit irritating, but you get used to the white noise, and then you kind of pattern it off or offload it to some degree of, I just wish I didn't have tinnitus. And so isn't that like similar to the compulsion, over compulsion of, where's my keys? Where's the car? Where's the this? Where's the that? Why is everything ... All of that white noise can be simply wiped away with, I'm going to just tie my shoes on and walk out the door. Try that for a sec. Hey, I can do it. Cool. Or, man, I got to do all these thoughts in the future. Right now, I'm just going to put a ruck on and go walk until I've got to go do all of those things in the future. So thoughts become white noise. White noise becomes the norm. And then all of a sudden, white noise overlays the reality of life that we're supposed to be engaging in.
100%. Glenn, you got something?
Yeah, like I just think, like we're talking about booking a trip, and it would take me a week or 2 weeks of research to look at like some Cancun resort, right? But then when the war in Ukraine happened, I remember going on the website, and my first thought was, how long is this going to take me to research? And then I was like, does this obsession control me, or do I control it? And then I was on a plane 3 days later. For the next 10 months, I was gone. So I knew, like, at that point, when I was on the plane, I was like almost like a pat on your back, not for going to Ukraine, but for making that decision and just doing it. fully investing, getting rid of that white noise and just go, stick my body in drive, my mind in neutral, and just do the right thing. Yeah. And again, it was a moment for me that it was almost like a light bulb moment where I'm like, okay, I own these obsessions. I know that. And it was like it was almost like a proud moment as I'm sitting in that airplane by myself and thinking like, holy, this could have been a really lengthy process that I would have just dwelled on and dwelled on. Instead, I just, you just do it.
Yeah, and the comparison is that wasn't a truck purchase. You know, you didn't think to yourself, I think I'll buy a truck sometime over the next 2 or 3 years. I'm going to start researching it, which is kind of what I do. Just as I said, just like yourself, if I decide I'm going to do something, then I start researching, and I put a lot of velocity behind my research. But if there's a milestone or a construct in place, we'll call it a timeline boundary that I'm working against, like I need to be in the Ukraine in 3 days. Stat. All right. Now I'm backwards. I'm reverse engineering the timeline to understand when I need to be on a plane, which is about 2 days before I need to be there. And so there's no room for white noise in that. It's a deliverable that I'm going to execute against on a compressed timeline, and it's going to get done. Unlike the truck, because there is no structure in place. There is no deliverable milestone or timelines. But if I want a truck by the end of this week or by the end of today, that's different than I need a truck by the end of today. So if you need to get to Ukraine, you'll freaking get there in a timely fashion. But if you want to get to Ukraine, well, now there's a little bit of nebulousness to it, unless there's a hard, stoned timeline to deliver against, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the priorities, right? Where are you putting your priorities? What is it that you are prioritizing in general? And if your priorities are to, well, let's just use the truck example. As you said, if you need a truck today, well, what are your options? I can call a friend. I know friends have a truck. Cool, come on over. Let's I'll pay you in beer and pizza, right? Or I need a truck that I can take. Okay, well, I could rent a truck. Well, that's a part. Then you can. There are multiple options in order to achieve the same goal. The obsessive compulsive part comes in when it becomes, I need to buy a truck right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then in order to walk in there, I have to open and close the door 4 times, or I have to see it. Like I was reading up on this a second ago, and it was saying that a lot of the let me just read it real quick here so that I don't mess it up. To get rid so the intensely distressing feelings and thoughts are the biggest issue. And to get rid of the thoughts, a person feels driven to do something repetitively. And the repetitive behavior, such as hand washing, checking on things, mental acts like counting, can significantly interfere with a person's daily activities and social interactions. And I think I just wanted to hammer on that portion, is that it will interfere with what you're doing. So if you want to buy a truck, then the obsessive compulsive issue can interfere with that. But if you need to buy a truck, then the obsessive compulsive will drive you through it. And I think that is it's something to be discussed a little bit, because again, you can utilize this if it's within your priority bandwidth. It's also going to make you feel uncomfortable. And as we've said on this show many times, you should seek those areas, right? If you don't put your keys there and it makes you feel uncomfortable for your keys there, maybe every once in a while you shouldn't put your keys there just to pattern interrupt.
No, that's why I've got a family. They just grab my keys and then put it where they want to. And then I've got to have that conversation. And so then the keys go back where it belongs. So
yeah,
that will happen randomly.
That's the great part about having the external factors, right? Because they can also bounce ideas off you. They can also come at you from different angles and say, hey, well, I needed the keys. I didn't have time to put them up because I was leaving right away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can sit there and, have your brain itch for a little while. But you have a lot of practice, Shaun, as well as Glenn, you guys have a lot. We all have a lot of practice in terms of being in those situations where we feel uncomfortable and then managing through them. So I think that I want to talk next about when we are in those points, when we are feeling really agitated that the compulsion or the obsession that we are driven to do isn't being done. How then do you manage through that? How then do you interrupt that pattern of feeling anxious or agitated that the thing isn't being done? Right? Wasn't able to close my door 3 times, and now I'm really agitated because that's on my mind and that's all I'm thinking about. How do we get past that?
I think one way to do it, and by the way, shopping for trucks. I think I stated not quite a year ago, but approximately a year ago, I'm thinking about buying a new vehicle. I'm thinking about buying an adventure vehicle, is what I said.
Yeah, that was in the fall, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I've been relentlessly researching trucks ever since. Relentlessly. Every single night, I'm looking at some sort of, I'm waiting for the 2024 Toyota Tacoma to release because I'm curious as to whether the step up height in that is going to be okay for my wife, and et cetera, et cetera. And what was the latest one that was just released? Oh, that would be the GMC Canyon AT4. Do I want the X version or the non-X version? Because the engine is dot. Listen, when I sink my teeth into something, I sink it in hard. And that's why, first things first, I'm very careful to sink my teeth into something without thinking about what I'm about to sink my teeth into right away. Because once I sink it in, that's it. It's game on, man. And so once it's game on, what does that mean to me? It means that I've also got to have, we'll call them boundaries of either timelines or deliverables. Because if I don't have a deliverable along the lines of, I've got to have a truck, I need to have a truck within the next 12 months, then I'll be researching 27 months later and still enjoying it because it fascinates me, because I'm curious, because I've sank my teeth into it and I will not let go of that thing until I have what I want, which is a truck, we'll call it. So if my objective that I'm executing against is a truck, I need to put a timeline in place to hold myself accountable so that I can get that thing done and move on. Now, coming back to the door, you got to check your door lock 3 times. Well, set up your day so that you've got boundaries along these lines. I'm going to leave my house, and I know I usually check my door 3 times, but I don't have time to check my door that many times because I've got to be there in 90 seconds. And so, however you need to constrain yourself to reduce some of those things. Now, maybe it'll create anxiety as you're checking the door for the 3rd time, thinking, I don't have time to check the door for the 3rd time. I'm going to be late. That will create anxiety, and maybe, or maybe not, but maybe it will create a situation where someone will think, I've got to either leave earlier, or I've got to leave ... or I've got to give myself more time. And through the mistake, quote unquote, mistake of not checking your locks fast enough, or whatever the case is, that error should force you to improve your process to a degree where you can now leave your house. You can now check your door 3 times. You can now go off to your timing, and you can feel like you've accomplished it well. Then you can look back at that. Why am I doing the 3 lock thing? So get right with what's going on rather than thinking, I have to do this and it's wrong. Set yourself up for a way to better understand what's happening through a different vector.
I like that. Glenn, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, like me, like I know for myself, having my cell phone is a big, almost like a trigger where if I don't have it on me, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And when I'm laying in bed researching vehicles, because I sound like everything that Shaun described, I do on like a daily, even though I'm not even looking, I'm not looking for a car. Like I just whatever. Anyways, my wife will give me a nudge and go, hey, like we're watching a show here. You know, I think that's something that everyone kind of has gone through. So the next day I really try and do something to get me out of that comfort zone, which would be leave my phone turn it off, right? And it because it gives me that a little bit of anxiety that I don't have that, which I know isn't healthy. And I leave it in a drawer, I turn it off, or I don't bring it with me, and I unplug. And I got into a really bad habit recently of bringing my phone on the golf course. And so the last couple times I went, I left my phone in the bag on, turned off, and I didn't bring it out once. And so I'm constantly trying to challenge myself to get out of those crutches, right? Like you're almost reliant on it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Can you imagine folding obsessions into obsessions or compulsions into compulsions? So now you're pulling out your one wood and you're throwing your ball up in the air as you're trying to check your phone. And now you're putting the ball down through the grass and you're like, what is even going on? What's the next compulsion that I need to fold into all of my compulsions? And so if you're getting to that point, I'm not talking about you, buddy, but if anyone's getting to that point where now you can't even do one compulsion well because all of your compulsions are competing, well, that's a time for the crowd to say, just throw the ball, pitcher.
Step up to the tee already, man. Like, geez.
Can I play through?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's something to be said here, is that there's a point where a routine becomes a compulsion. And I think that's the thing that we need to be aware of, is that when the routine starts to take over, and that's where you feel a compulsion in order to do that thing. So I have a routine at night. I walk around the house, I check the locks, I turn off all the lights, and I do it in a very specific order because it's more fluid, I guess. It has a I can't think of the word right now, but efficiency. Thank you. And there's a particular sequence in which I do that. And if something gets in the way of that, it makes my brain itch a little bit, because now I'm going around something and now I can't do the routine. And it's in those moments that you have to, as you said, Glenn, you have to actually check yourself and go, wait a second. Is this really necessary to the pattern of my life that I hit the locks in this sequence? No? Okay. Take a breath, recenter yourself, and then engage the issue. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about here regularly, is the ability to engage.
What is the issue, though? What are you executing against,
And that's so what my thought was in this is that the issue is the compulsion, the feeling of anxiety based off the fact that I'm not doing what I have done normally, naturally.
And so the normal execution of that task is against what mission? The mission is what? Locking your house, securing your house?
Yeah.
So you could do that. You could, if you were an I Spy with My Little Life, you thought all tier one-ish, you would never repeat your routine. The only thing that you're doing is securing your perimeter.
Yeah.
And why would you secure it the same way every single time? I suppose you could, but that's like not tier one.
Well, it's
and so you can efficiently secure your perimeter in a randomized pattern so that no one can track your routine. Let's pretend for a moment. Let's play it out, Jason Bourne, so that there's someone in the woods that's hiding and watching you with a sniper scope as every night you do your little secure the perimeter routine. Guess what? By day 3, I know exactly what time you're walking past your kitchen window. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So if you want to play that game of securing the perimeter, you can do it this way one night. You can do it that way the other night. You're still executing against your mission statement of secure the perimeter, but now you just get to do it in a whole bunch of ways. Where it's kind of gone a little sideways, we'll call it, is you have refined it to such a degree of white noise that you feel the mission is to walk the same circle in the same direction.
And I think we've all driven home from work, and we get home and then we go,
how did I get here?
How did I just get here? Right? And it's almost like that too. It's you kind of forget the process, or it just becomes second nature. And I got into a habit of taking a different route home every once in a while, just to make sure that I was staying focused.
Yeah.
And same thing with my phone. I won't use my GPS all the time. Yeah, I may sit in a little bit of traffic, but now I'm actually I'm focusing on my surroundings or who I'm with, or whatever.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing with Chance talking about how he's securing his perimeter, and then when something's in his way, like his kid, I'm securing the perimeter. I've got to walk around you. This is not my routine.
Yep.
I'm going to get compulsive in this moment. So, if things are throwing off your regular trip home, we'll call it, it's because you're on autopilot. And all of a sudden something's changed in your autopilot routine and you don't like it because your autopilot allows you to not be present, allows you to stop thinking, allows you to not even be quote unquote alive to some degree. But the moment that you start pattern interrupting or randomizing your routine while still keeping it a routine, well, those pattern interrupts are what make you present in the moment. And so that's when you're alive, is when you're in the now. But we're never in the now if we turn off our brain, execute our subroutine, and don't think about breathing.
That is 100% it. That was what I was trying to get at, actually, with the whole routine portion of it, is when the routine becomes a compulsion, and that you are not thinking about it to the point that when something does go wrong, it is a catastrophe, right? It's all of a sudden there's traffic on the route that you always take in order to do this one thing, and that is world ending because you had a certain timing and this is how long it takes, and the blah 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 blah.
What would you have thought if you were doing your normal secure the perimeter routine and you went to go lock your door thoughtlessly, like not even aware that you're checking your door? What if the door was gone? What would you have done? At what point would you have noticed that someone had stolen your door? Because you kind of went like, hang on a sec, I can't. Oh, the door's gone. You know what I'm saying?
Is that a problem where you live, Shaun? Is
people stealing doors?
Where do you live, Shaun?
I will say this, that where I live, I don't lock my door when I go to bed.
Yeah. Well, and that's...
You don't have a door anymore. It's gone.
Exactly. It's already
you're
gone.
Right, it is gone.
Oh, geez, it's gone. But I think that's part of the pattern. The thing that I know a lot of people out there, and I was one of them for many years, was you just kind of run you try to offload so much stuff without thought prior to understanding the fact that there has to be thought to begin with and multiple reps before you can offload it versus just offloading it, where I think that's, a lot of people do that. We just, I need to go to work. Okay, well, I'm autopilot, boom, gonna go to work, autopilot on the way home, autopilot all the way back. And there's been a couple of times where I've been driving down the road and I've looked up and been like, where am I? Oh, okay. And it actually takes a second to really re-engage my brain and go, right, now I have to do this. There's also been other times that I've realized there's been one car following me for quite a while. I wonder if they're actually following me or not. I'm just going to random it up all of a sudden. I'm going to take 3 right turns and just and come right back to where I was just to see, because you never know. And I think
very
breaking
Jason Bourne of you.
Very Jason Bourne. I mean, I am, really. This is the Chance Burl show. I'm living that life. That's right.
You're living that dream.
What's the point I was trying to make is the fact that every once in a while, interrupt your patterns. Interrupt the things that you think that are that you've offloaded into normalcy without thought. Interrupt them. See what happens. And if you start to get agitated, well, maybe you should look at that. That's my thought. We are just about at time here. I do. Sorry, I missed this completely. Afternoon, Daniel. How's it going? Nice to see you. And he says, so Shaun loves baseball.
Apparently. I know all the teams.
All of them. I'm pretty sure it involves a bat and a ball and mitts.
Listen, here's my only connection to baseball, and this is straight up fact. Tanya, or Super Cyan Magical Girl, threw up a photo in her Instagram stories with a quote, something along the lines of full send by Shaun or something like that.
Yeah, you went full Shaun.
I went full Shaun. Yeah, I went full send, full Shaun. And that's me with a baseball bat about to crack a guy upside the head where we were in 2 Commando overseas with a baseball bat, and as part of an unarmed combat demonstration. So that's the extent of my baseball knowledge. I do understand bats. I just don't understand baseball teams.
Well, you know what? I think the more important thing is understanding how to use bat, in my mind. But we'll see. So we are just about at time here. Any final thoughts on obsessive compulsive disorder, or routines, or management of either, Glenn?
No, I think everything's been covered pretty good. Don't stick to a same routine every day, and push yourself out of your comfort zone. I think that pretty much sums up the conversation. It's been good.
I like it. Shaun?
Yeah, and always observe yourself, of course, for better ways to do life, but get engaged with other people who can cold eye review your life, who can interact with you not as a judge and executioner, but can interact with you as a partner in life, to engage in more life, to have more fun in life, to equally push each other in life. Whether you struggle with patternized compulsions or not, find a way to weaponize them so that you're actually pulling further ahead in life rather than slipping backwards. To me, the subject of OCD comes down to how much you manage it rather than letting it manage you.
100%. Well, again, Glenn, can't thank you enough for being here, man. Great conversation as always. We're gonna get you on more often. I'm just gonna keep prodding you on Instagram.
Bro, pick up the pace.
Yeah. I'm gonna do it 3 times consistently every time, just to be sure. But as we all learn how to manage our compulsions, as we all build upon our ability to deviate from those compulsions, we'll be able to grow into better people, better men, and we can do that here every day on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.